Okay.
All right, Ann, you're all set.
Great, thank you. Greetings, everybody. This is Ann Graham, Executive Director of Texans for the Arts, the statewide arts advocacy organization. Welcome to our weekly Wednesday Arts Advocacy Update. I am pleased today that we have invited Dr. Gary Gibbs, the Executive Director of the Texas Commission on the Arts, to be our special guest. And I'll be posing some questions to him about the TCA and the budget process. Before I do, I want to give a plug to our very special virtual biennial Arts Advocacy Summit. Many of you might have been involved in our Arts Advocacy Days every other year during the legislative session, where we convene at the Texas Capitol and we do trainings around issues that are of importance during the legislative process, the budget of the TCA, the hotel occupancy tax, and other policy and bill issues that might arise. This year, the Capitol is not available. It is not closed due to COVID. It is not open. It is closed to Arts Advocacy Days and other advocacy days because of COVID-19. So we have taken this event virtually. We would love your participation. Your voice is really important in the democratic process. You can learn more about and register for our summit on our webpage, texansforthearts.com. It starts in a 3-day session on next Tuesday, January 26th, for a preliminary overview on how to set up a legislative visit, sort of setting the stage. We then meet 2 weeks later on February 9th for our visits and the trainings, all about the information that we'll be conveying to our legislative officials. And then we wrap up on Thursday, the 11th of February, with a happy hour and a celebration. So we really encourage you. This is a very important year for us to speak up with the Texas legislature, and a very complicated year, and we hope you will join us. Again, go to texansforthearts.com. I now want to introduce Dr. Gibbs. Dr. Gibbs' artistic roots are in vocal music, and he toured the world with a religious music entity as a soloist and choir director. After returning to school and getting his PhD, he became a music teacher for 5th graders in Houston ISD. And then he became the first director of education and outreach for the Houston Grand Opera, where he worked for 16 years, developing and implementing education and music programs. He then took on the position of executive director here at the Texas Commission on the Arts in Austin, based in Austin, in 2007. Gary also serves at the national level. He was the former president of the board of the National Association of State Arts Agencies, and currently he serves on the Mid-America Arts Alliance board of directors as well. And we're very pleased to have his leadership here in Texas. I'm going to pose sort of a very broad question for him to address during the time we have today. Gary, if you don't mind me calling you Gary or Dr. Gibbs, there's a real cycle to the work of the Texas Commission on the Arts. You're a year-round agency. You distribute grants, you run programs, you provide statewide leadership. And now we're just starting our biennial Texas state legislative session. Would you talk briefly about the TCA, the agency itself, and then share with us about the budgeting process? How is your budget set? What's the timeline in the process from getting your budget proposed into the state's budget? What are the milestones that you're looking for and watchful during the legislative session? 2 sessions ago, Texas was 49th in the United States with a per capita arts funding. I think it was about 36 cents per capita. And this session, we climbed up to this last session, we climbed up to 36th in the United States. So we have had successes with the Texas legislature on funding for the arts. We're hoping to have those again this year. And we'd love to sort of hear from you, Gary, about how that all comes together. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. It's good to be with y'all today. It's been a very exciting day on many fronts, including here in the capital of the state, where we are preparing for the session. And it's one thing I'll say from the beginning is that government, both local, state, and federal government, is designed to be purposefully slow, so things don't happen quickly. When it comes to our budget, we actually started about 6 months ago in the budget process. The first thing we're required to do is develop a strategic plan. And we're required to, and it's a plan for 5 years. It's not what most nonprofit arts organizations think of as a strategic plan, because we have to submit another one every 2 years. So basically it outlines the programs that we do at the agency. And we are primarily a granting institution. We support arts and culture throughout the state, primarily through operating support grants and project-based grants. So when we begin this process, first with the strategic plan, then we submit that to the Office of the Governor and the Legislative Budget Board. The Legislative Budget Board is a part of state government that most people are unfamiliar with. They're staffers who work for the legislature, and they play a very important role in the budget process. The next step that we go through is called the Legislative Appropriations Request. And this is where we work with the LBB and the Office of the Governor, and we submit the numbers of our previous budget from the previous biennium. Because the rule is you cannot ask for more money when you submit your budget request, your legislative appropriation request, than from what you had the year before. If you ask for more money, it's something called an exceptional item, and you have to then justify the reason of asking for more money. So as we were going into session, the Office of the Governor informed every state agency that it was going to be a very tight budget and that we should limit our exceptional items request. In other words, we should just go with flat funding from our previous biennium and hope that we could retain those funds. The comptroller, just within the past couple of weeks, announced the biennial revenue estimate, which showed that the Texas economy had not suffered as greatly as had been predicted. In fact, it's just a $44 million shortfall from the previous biennium. However, all the agencies had already submitted their LARs. Our base had already been approved by the Legislative Budget Board and the Office of the Governor. And in our case at TCA, that's a little bit in our base funding of a little over $10 million a year. So for our exceptional item request, which is over and above your base budget, we requested a restoration of a 5% cut that we were required to take this current biennium by the Office of the Governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Lieutenant Governor. And that amounted to about $1.3 million. So going into this session, we have our base of a little over 10 million, and then we're going to be asking for an additional 1.3 million of additional funds. Now, the trick to all of this is that the bill has not been introduced showing what is proposed for our budget. And many times, once the bill is introduced, agencies are allowed to revise their ask and ask for more money if possible. We'll wait and see what happens. Typically, what happens in a normal year, and of course this is not normal, but typically what would happen is that I would appear before two committees, one from the Senate called Senate Appropriations, and one from the House called, in the Senate, Senate Finance, and in the House, House Appropriations. And I would make a presentation about the importance of the work we do, the work that you do, the work that we support, the economic impact of the arts on the state of Texas, and the brief summary of our budget request and why we're asking for more money than our base. We would answer questions sometimes from the members of both houses, and we would submit written materials to support that. In previous years, we've also had folks like Ann come and testify on behalf of arts advocates across the state in support of our budget request. Typically, I have a commissioner, one of my board members that are all appointed by the governor. I have 9 board members appointed by the governor. So typically the board chair or another commission member would also testify. That's all unclear how that's going to happen this year. Whether even I will have the opportunity to testify before the committees. I suspect that I will some way. It may be virtual instead of in person, but that's not yet clear. They haven't told us exactly how that's going to operate. What happens then is that each committee in the House and in the Senate pass their version of a budget for every state agency, including TCA. So sometimes they match in both the House and the Senate. Most times they do not. They do not agree on how much money our agencies should receive. So that being the case, the Senate will adopt its version of the budget. The House will adopt its version of the budget. And then they will appoint 5 people from each body, 5 senators and 5 House members who will get together in a room and magically come up with the finalized state budget. And that usually happens in early May. So it's from January all the way up until May. You don't know exactly where you stand in the budget process. And then, of course, both houses would have to pass the budget. The interesting thing in the budget process is on the House side, once the House version is presented, the members have an opportunity, all members, not just the Appropriations Committee, have an opportunity to amend it from the floor. And this is another time that sometimes our agency has been imperiled because a legislator would introduce an amendment to strip away our money and give it to another agency. No one has ever been successful in doing that, but it's always a little nerve-wracking. And so that's why we rely on advocates like you and Ann's organization to make sure that we have champions in both houses that can support our request, and on the House side, defend our budget should an amendment be introduced to take money away from us. So with that, Ann, I think I've covered most of it. It's probably a lot more in the weeds than our folks in the field want to know. I just want to assure them that it's a constant process over this 5-month period from January to May. We are constantly monitoring what's happening in both houses, watching bills that might be introduced, and just trying to stay on top of how it impacts the creative industries that we support.
Thank you, Gary. I think there's one thing you can also wrap up with is that there is a governor's veto period, right? So once the budget is actually passed and other bills are passed as well. Do you want to finish that? You want to tell?
Yeah, I should mention that because that's happened to us before as well. That after sine die, once the legislature adjourns, the governor has 30 days to issue line item vetoes. He has the power to do line item vetoes. So if he sees something in anyone's budget that he doesn't agree with, he has the ability to strike it through. The legislature can override a governor's veto in Texas. However, because they are no longer in session, they never have the opportunity to do that. So should the governor veto something, it's pretty much a done deal in the state of Texas. And that happened to us several sessions ago. Last session, when we got a large increase to our budget, the governor supported it and did not issue any vetoes.
Yeah, thank you. I hope listeners do. I mean, I know it sounds like alphabet soup too. There's all the acronyms of the LBB and the different committees and things, but I think it's really important for people to understand the process that it takes to get appropriations, to understand, to also understand as advocates where your opportunities are to speak up. And clearly, all year long, we want to be developing relations with our legislative officials and our decision makers so that they understand why the arts are so important. But then there are clearly times like our Arts Advocacy Summit, our Arts Advocacy Day, where it's the beginning of the budget process. Decisions have not been made, votes have not been taken yet. And that's a really good opportunity for us to be able to meet with our legislators and talk about why the arts are so important, especially, and everything, of course, is amplified with the pandemic and with COVID. So I hope everyone followed along with that. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comment box on Facebook. And we can wait here for just a minute and see if anybody has any questions. But I really do, I hope that understanding the process of what every agency has, this pattern that they have to follow. I hope we have opportunities to testify in front of the Senate Finance and House Appropriations. Those are really important opportunities. I've been present certainly when Dr. Gibbs and the chairman Dale Brock have spoken and testified. So those are important opportunities. And again, developing relationships with the decision makers and especially the ones who serve on these committees and why the arts is so important. We are at 4:18. We try to wrap up in 15 minutes. This is just a nugget of information. Dr. Gibbs, we thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hope to have you back again on another Wednesday as we work our way through the session and we follow the progress of the appropriation process. Do you have any other thing you want to chime in?
No, thank you for having me.
All right, class dismissed. There's a quiz at the end on all the different the alphabet soup. And again, we thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Thank you.